Okay, so we started the morning more focused on world models, and now we are moving to the social cognition aspect of the workshop as well, and it is my pleasure to introduce Ken Nakayama from Harvard.
No longer at Harvard. It's been a while. Okay, I got invited here because I live just 15, 20 minutes walk from here, so I got here very easily. Okay. The agenda, basically, a whole bunch of a potpourri of different things. I didn't really know what this conference was, so I sort of try to cover the waterfront a little bit. You'll see that there. And I'm also going to talk about biological versus AI consciousness, because I think that might be pertinent. And I got very interested in, at the end of my career, in the motor system. So I'll have a lot of stuff with motor systems and how that relates to psychology. Oh, my background, I did single neuron recording a long time ago when your grandparents were starting grad school. And then I did psychophysics at a tiny research institute, and then I did more of that. And all of a sudden I got a phone call. I was at Harvard for a while. And some of the stuff that I've done since, so that's kind of my career. And so I really wasn't a psychologist. I was always in a sort of neurophysiology setting, but I became a psychologist because I was in the Department of Psychology. And when you're there, that's what they do. And then you have to do things. You're the chairman and stuff like that. And then you're head of the undergraduate program and stuff like that. And the difference between Berkeley, Harvard, Berkeley, Princeton, and Yale, they have good psychology departments since it's very scientific. Harvard's psychology department it's got Steve Pinker and all these very fancy lecturers, and the kids, that's what they think psychology is. And so they don't really, my colleagues there, they don't take their courses. And if I gave a course in the psychology department in Vision, which other people did, you get 4 people. So, but I did teach a university course, and then people do it because it's a requirement. Patrick Kavanaugh did that for many years. And so what do I do with my department? Well, I don't know what to do with it, but I figured I better learn psychology. And I got very interested in consciousness, not because I was interested in consciousness particularly, because I thought it was an intractable problem, but it got me a way to learn about psychology. I taught that course, and I did freshman seminars and stuff like that. It was very nice to get, if you ever get kids straight from high school, the first year semester of college, I think that's worth it in a small seminar. And so I was always a reductionist when I started neurophysiology, trying to understand things like that. Always seeking neural explanations, but people here don't seem to do that, and I've stopped. I've given up on that, really given up on it. And one time I was in the University of Tokyo library, and it was empty. I don't know what they were doing there. Maybe it was summertime, and nobody there. I had the whole there for hours, and I picked up this book. It's called Machiavellian Intelligence, and I'm kind of a fan of Machiavelli, so that's kind of fun. And I found this article by a guy named Nick Humpreys, and I don't know who the hell Nick Humpreys is, I just know he's British. And he said some kind of not nice things about social psychology. The experimental psychologists in Britain have tended to regard social psychology as a poor country cousin of their subject, gauche, undisciplined, slightly absurd. So who's Nick Humpreys? Well, I won't say much about him, but he's part of the intellectual elite of England. I think his grandpa, Aviel Hill, was a Nobel Prize winner in physiology, and I think his auntie married, his name was up there, John Maynard Keynes, one of the most important economists in Britain. So, but he did discover something very important, which was blind sight in monkeys, where he found that if you remove the visual cortex, you're supposed to go blind. But he figured out a way to show that they weren't blind. They had something called blind sight, which was a real contribution. But what's the received wisdom before Humphrey? What did people think? First there was general intelligence, and then, oh, we have to do social life. Well, you use your intelligence to do social life. For example, when I was having to publicize the undergraduate program in the department, there's within the person, like vision and audition and hearing and language and stuff like that. And then there's the person itself, and then dealing with the social world. So that's sort of the credo in our department. Probably still is. But Nick Humphrey was sort of, the reason he could say sort of slightly dismissive things, because he sort of came around and he says, let me recount how I came to a different way of thinking, since this personal history will lead you to directly what I want to say. Now, the essay, it's just worth reading. I was sort of overwhelmed with this essay. And I don't know if you, but sometimes you read something and you overinterpret it. You think it's wonderful and you remember it in its most extreme form. And so I think I overdid Humphrey, but then the rest of the world has caught up with them, and they have that idea as well. So Humphrey said, oh, evolution of intelligence, it's not finding food, it's not making tools, it's not navigating the environment, it's something really more important. It's your social life. And he has a whole paper on this, but social life is very difficult, it's highly problematical, it's a game of chess. And so, well, he wrote this paper 50 years ago. What's happened in the last 50 years? Some things move slowly. And I think the topic I'm going to talk about right now is going to move slowly, and I don't think it's going to get solved. Maybe at the end of your lifetime, there'll be some more things to say about it, but it's important. So he said, there's a thing called, so what happened in the last 50 years? Well, there's something which I would call Machiavellian intelligence, which is what he talked about. More social relationships are very complicated and require a lot of brain power. And then there's a more stronger argument, and he sort of makes it, and I jump up to conclusions, was that solving problems in the social world is the basis of really the high-level cognition, kind of things that what we consider abstract thought. And so that's a route to general intelligence. And some early pertinent work was a guy named Robin Dunbar. I didn't ever heard of this guy, but he has a number next to him. So if we grow up and you have a number next to you, you've succeeded, okay? Anyway, how many of you have a number? I won't ask, but anyway. So basically, he has this idea that he didn't call this a Dunbar number, probably somebody else did, but anyway, it's a number of individuals you're sort of comfortable with in your troop. And what he did was he was able to show a famous graph, which I don't really understand, but it's been reproduced many times. The size of your brain is on one axis, and the size of your troop is along there. So wow, these primates, the primates that have bigger brains have bigger troops. There's some data there. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about Frans de Waal, who, I don't know how it happened, but he happened to have a window next to a giant area, and he was able to look at chimps. And he's very much in debt to Jane Goodall. You probably know more about Jane Goodall than Frans de Waal, but Jane Goodall was the pioneer in this area because she worked in the natural world, and she had to go, sleuthing around and seeing all kinds of things. But Frans de Waal had an area about the size of a football field and had different windows, and so he could just, for 4 years, he just kind of looked and peeked and had other people look, and he just did this for 4 years straight. This is before video recordings. He just had his note, sort of like an anthropologist in some funny world, but this is now, maybe it's Planet of the Apes, I'm not really sure what it is, but he did this for 4 straight years in a very intense way, and so this is not experimental science, and people would criticize. Like he started thinking about like these. He sort of he knows each one of these primates, and they have names and stuff like that. Well, Jane Goodall did that as well, and so you could say, well, it's just anthropomorphic, not scientific. Persuasive? I think it is. So, what are some of the results he came up with? Well, first of all, if you read the book, which I really recommend, his book Chimpanzee Politics, even if you don't, it's just to be an educated person, you'll learn something. He had lots of stories, and a couple stories were kind of interesting to me. One was Grandma Alpha. It turns out 2 moms were with their kids, and they're all squabbling, and the moms, you shouldn't do this when you have kids. You shouldn't interfere with, when your kids have squabble, you shouldn't get involved. Remember that when you start having kids. So they started squabbling, and Grandma came, the alpha female came, and she broke it up. Another story was, this was kind of horrible, you know about hierarchies and stuff like that. Well, the alpha male, 2 beta males plotted, killed him, and ripped off his testicles. So that shows it's pretty consequential. in this world. But there's sukkar, there's kinds of things, there's things that people help each other, but there's also some pretty different kind of stuff, which, you know, maybe Machiavelli is the right word. But so he just had so many things, so many personal details. You're looking at these animals for 4 straight years. I think that's all he did, and thank God he did. And he just was able to show all different kinds of things that animals, these primates did. And so form alliances, intervene in fights. I mean, read the book. Maybe there's a video also, but it's really quite bracing and informative. And I don't know, it'll make you realize that humans are part of a larger chain of being, let's say. So then he, not only does he tell the stories, he has a lot of ideas about what's going on here. And I would say that he's a major figure in this. And I think in a sense, even though Nick Humphreys himself was mostly speculation, Nick Humphreys was sort of prophetic in the sense that he sort of indicated that there's something really going on. It really takes a lot of brain power to negotiate your social world. And this is not just in primates or many other animals, but the chimps are probably the best example. So, like I said, recommended reading. So what's the 50-year takeaway? Well, the original hypothesis is that Machiavellian intelligence proposed that intelligence evolved primarily with the challenge of social life. Individuals who could track relations for intentions, anticipate hit over others, navigate, do all these things. That's there. That hasn't been taken away. And to add a little bit the empathy part, and there's cooperation. And this is natural. This is probably genetic. It's not just doing it just. And if you read Machiavelli's The Prince, he tells you to be nice, but that's only to get ahead. But so this is the thing that I think that's an interesting thing is the sort of extension of Machiavellian intelligence is if you have the machinery to do all these things. Just think about all those different things. They're like recursive relationships, all these different counterfactuals, the subjunctive, all these things like that. Well, you must have some kind of complex data structure. That's what you guys are going to have to figure out. And it could be repurposed for abstract thought, all the other kinds of thinking, law, all the other things that we pride ourselves as having, that essentially could be the building ground for it. Well, it hasn't fared that well because it's just not how do you prove these things. Because also things like finding food, making tools, and finding food, ecological. When do you pick the apple, the cherries, and where do you find them? You have to go all these animals have to. And I've been a big fan of animals called meerkats. There's a TV program called Meerkat Manor. These animals, they're tiny little thing about this big. They have a square kilometer to deal with. They have to go all over the place and find food, and they have warfare with other conspecifics. That's not insignificant. The finding food is not insignificant. Making tools, he poo-poo tools, and I think tool making has been maybe overemphasized, but it's not insignificant. And then navigating the environment, which is something that I think is one of the most interesting things in neuroscience right now, navigating the environment, and I think that's some of the really good stuff is being done. And well, here's an interesting thought I had was this Machiavellian intelligence here. LLMs are their language, they're strongly social. Maybe there's a sort of connection there. I mean, I'm just pointing it out. But the thing I got interested in also was I call it sensory motor intelligence. And so this is a thing that's been neglected, and how you deal with other people with your body and how you relate to other bodies. And I went berserk in a sense towards the end of my career. So they say, to every hammer, everything's a nail. Well, I got started recording motions of the hand. I started getting very innocent and just doing anything I could and measuring things with and I had a couple PhD students and stuff like that, so I get a little bit out of vision. And so here's a couple things I've done with that. So I call it embedded social psychology. So I did a couple studies here, which I'll talk about. How am I doing? I'm not doing too badly. So I call them sociomotor actions. Well, we all know that there's lots of different things that people do together, and they have to understand each other's bodies, and that's what we talk about. So I created a lab version of what I call the penalty kick. And so, isn't the World Cup happening right now? All right, so I haven't watched it. Is it on TV already? Not yet? You guys don't watch the World. You're not watching, huh? Okay. What? You guys are working. Okay. So anyway, so here's the we got there wasn't a Nature paper, Cognition paper out of it. Okay, so here's the idea. There's an attacker on the left there, and there's a blocker. And I got a big plexiglass screen here, and I got 2 Post-its up there, put up there. And the attacker's supposed to touch one of the things, and the blocker's supposed to block it. And of course, we make all these measurements, all these off-the-shelf gadgets. I'm for new technology, but I'm for off-the-shelf technology. Just buy it. And if you're get into science, I find that you make the equipment, and then somebody uses it. They get the Nobel Prize. You made the equipment. Anyway, here goes. So here's a little video. I think of it. I think how to do. I'm not sure how to do this. Maybe it just works. See, I'm not. There we go. So you can see that it's easy. And Harvard kids loved it. They don't know each other. They're competing on a game to get points, things like that. So what you can do is you can make measurements. And one of the things we found right away was the reaction, and you guys mostly not psychology, but reaction times are usually 250 to 300 milliseconds. These reaction times were 200 milliseconds, or below, very short. So wow, what's going on here? Why are these reaction times so short? So so maybe it's the human being, that you're dealing with the human being that makes you more motivated or something about maybe it's their posture. So we need a control experiment. So we took the, on a screen, we had some dots move like that, as if that's the finger motions. And so you play against this computer. And it turns out, yes, if you play against a computer, there's the experiment there, then you get the normal choice reaction time, which are these things here. This is around 280, and this is maybe 250, depending on if there's a constant timing or variable timing. So that's fine. That's standard psychology. But here, the reaction times are much shorter. So you're dealing with a person. So what's going on here? Well, yeah, there's some kind of. I remember when I took a medical school class once, and we had to do something slightly funny to a frog. We had to sort of put some irritant. The frog didn't have it was just a spinal cord, and you just touched something like that, some irritant, and all of a sudden, rather than wipe the irritant off, it put its other leg out, because that was to stabilize its position. So anytime you do something, you got to do something else before you do that. In fact, most things before you do anything, you should record. If you record neural signals from your butt, that's probably going to be the first thing that's going to go. But we didn't do that. But anyway, so there's bodily cues here. What part of the body information? You just do a simple. This is not high tech. You just limit the body's viewpoint. You just show different things. And you do the experiment. And you still get a gain if you have just the head. And we've done experiments more that are just that part of the head there. And then we did machine learning later on. It was another study with some students at MIT. And it's all there in the head. It helps you predict where you're going to put your finger. And this is a very important point here. There's no learning.
The eyes are looking at.
We had sunglasses, another study with sunglasses too. So, and then the important thing is there's no learning. In other words, you're just as good at this when you start the experiment as when you end it. So this is the important point, because basically, question?
Did you randomly sample the tall attacker, or was it attack
Say it a little louder, Mom. Not hard, a little hard of hearing.
Did the
What?
attacker get to choose where they were attacking, or did you ever like?
There's two different points. No, yeah, we did that too. We had them choose, or we did two things. We had them under command, and we did it voluntarily. Mostly, I think, it was command. We just told them what to do. But I don't remember the details. It's a while back. So, well, let me go back here. So basically, I think what we can say is that we have already made built-in sort of model of human action, all the different things that you do with human action. So that's another form of, quote, social intelligence, but it's not something that's talked about, but maybe not at this meeting, but I think, I'm hoping that somebody will pick up on this. Here's another study, which is fun, but it's not completely on point, but I can't stop showing it because it's a fun thing to do. I was entertaining a bunch of the young children in this game called Whack-A-Mole, and the kids were 5-year-olds having a lot of fun. So I made up a version of that for adults, and you can measure the measurements and stuff like that, and you can make measurements and stuff like that. So the movie is kind of, can you see that? It's not, let me see, how do I get this going now? Can you see it in the size better? Can you see that? I can't see anybody. Can you see that? Anyway, that's the game. So, well, sorry, I'm having trouble here. What do we do next? See, I don't give talk. I don't even go to meetings anymore. I don't give talks, so bear with me. Oh, here we go. Okay, I go to meetings just to hang around the corridors. So anyway, what was interesting about this group, reaction times were completely correlated. Wow. And the distance moved are correlated. So what's going on? Well, these people just adjusted their motor readiness just to the other person. And then we had Confederates and all this stuff like that. I mentioned that just as I said, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. This happened to be a nail. And we got a Nature, not Nature, but what is it? I forget these journals. You guys know about these journals. I forgot. PNAS paper out of it, which is good. So anyway, basically saying that this is, I got tired. I'm okay. So now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is consciousness. Because I taught this class, and I don't know if it's relevant, but AI people talk about it. They'll think it's imminent or not imminent. And I want to talk about, there's a whole sort of renaissance of consciousness studies, and for some reason, I've not paid attention to it. So I'm an oddball. And my sources are this book. William James is the best source for consciousness because he describes what consciousness is like. It's just, you read the chapter, The Stream of Thought, and you say, yes, that's what it's like, but nobody said it. So it's worth reading. This Cognitive Theory of Consciousnness here is a book, 1988. It's a pretty damn good book. It's out of date, but at the same time, it sort of it takes a lot of William James and puts it into a cognitive psychology framework. And the most important paper to me, I learned about it. This is an obscure person. You've never heard of him. Has anybody heard of him? Bjorn Merker. I don't think he has an academic position. Have you heard of him? Okay, we'll talk. Okay. I've never met him. I've talked to him on the phone. Anyway, he's an interesting character, and I think he has the best theory of consciousness. And it's a theory, the consciousness is a sort of a user-friendly interface for an evolving motor system. I won't go into details about it too much, but I think it's very important, and it's worth going in. So I learned about his paper after I stopped giving courses on consciousness. I never was satisfied. I mean, I got some satisfaction from his ideas. Okay, so let me just make a little chart, and this will be the end of my talk, is what are the properties of consciousness that we can talk about, and how do we compare it? So, so here's, our consciousness is very capacity limited, and its stability is very fragile. I mean, if you're trying to concentrate on something, somebody comes in and starts barking at you or playing the radio, disrupted. Its flexibility is wide. You could put anything into your car, and any thought in your mind can be connected to any other thought. Think of each neuron is connected to only 10,000 other neurons, and there's billions of neurons. How do these thoughts get connected? They get connected this way. Divisibility, not very good. I mean, some people can do a lot of things, you know, what do they call it? Juggling and do all kinds of stuff and play and read and play the piano. Unity of action, this is important because you've got a body and you're always from a single vantage point. Okay, well, let's talk about biology. Well, this is biology. What about AI? Well, it's completely different if AI has consciousness because the capacity is unlimited, I suppose. Stability could be really robust. Flexibility could be very wide. Unlimited. Unity of action? Not really. Single vantage point? Not really. So this is the part that, this is my major conclusion. God. Okay? All the things that, if we had consciousness in AI, it would be God. When I was a kid, you're supposed to pray to God, and God would listen to all of your prayers. I mean, not just you, and you, everybody. Unlimited consciousness is unlimited stability, robust, flexibility, widest, connected, unlimited, divisibility, unlimited. You need action? No, not really, but not needed. Well, the only final one I said, well, but maybe robots is different. Robots might be different because robots are more like us. I mean, humanoid robots, the kind that we want to sort of have this fantasy about, like in, what's the name of that movie, Blade Runner or something like that. It's the same with us. I mean, robots, if they're going to be really good robots, they're going to be like us, humanoid ones. And that comes a little bit from, I didn't talk to Bjorn about this, but I think that would be his conclusions. Thank you.
I guess why do you say that there is a single vantage point when the social cognition is imagining the theory of what other people
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm kind of a vision person. I can say, so that's a good point because you can see, if you're really a socially embedded person, you can see the vantage points of all the other people. A good point. Did you have something?
Yeah, I think there's one phenomenon of these adaptations that you pointed out, which are very easy to study. When people talk to each other, they very quickly adapt to each other's vocabulary. They start using the same words, even if originally.
Yeah. So there's a huge amount of social mirroring there. Thank you. Oh yeah.